sister and I made fun of almost everyone and everything. You had to have a really thick skin to hang around my family. One of the things that we made fun of most was names that we deemed as old-fashioned. Just about anyone with a name that was popular in the previous century was fair game, but the poor two people who were most beaten down by this game were my own two parents, Edgar and Priscilla. There were so many variations of their names that one of the grandchildren one time didn't even know what their real name was. Another name that showed up from time to time caused hysterical laughter in my family. That was Beulah. And I don't remember if there was ever a real person named Beulah in the family or in the neighborhood, but I distinctly remember my brother making a lot of fun of that name and calling people Beulah that he deemed had done something or said something stupid. So then I went off to college and I studied Hebrew. And I learned what the word Beulah meant. It shows up tonight in our Old Testament reading from Isaiah 62. You shall no more be termed forsaken. Your land shall no more be termed desolate. You shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land, Beulah, married. It's the Hebrew word for married. That's what Beulah means. And I remember sitting in Hebrew class and fighting as hard as I could not to laugh out loud when I heard that, because all I could think of was my brother looking at my sister who had said something stupid and saying, "Nice try, Beulah." I never would have guessed that Beulah was not just another old name. And it certainly wasn't a put down. But Beulah, as it turns out, is an amazing promise. Here in Isaiah 62, we see Isaiah speaking to God's people who have not done a very good job of acting like God's people are supposed to act. Remember that God gave us the Ten Commandments for a reason. And the reason He gave us the Ten Commandments is not so that we can go to heaven. If that were the case, if the Ten Commandments were given so that we could go to heaven, we'd all be in big trouble. Because none of us can follow the Ten Commandments. If we break a commandment in thought, word, or deed, in any way whatsoever, the smallest little part of the commandment, we're guilty, we're told, of breaking the whole law, and then we're damned. So, like all of God's people, all the way back to Adam and Eve, we are saved the same way. By grace, not by works. By keeping the law, God's people of the Old Testament received a better life. God gave them a productive land in which to live. God protected them from their enemies. And when they chose to break the law and to blatantly worship false gods, then they were exiled. They were abandoned by God. In essence, He divorced them. By the end of the book of Isaiah, God's people are pretty miserable in Babylon. And they're sitting in exile, and they are really wishing that they had not made the choices they made to ignore God and to ignore His law. And God, their estranged husband, comforts them through these words from the prophet Isaiah. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. You shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. We have a loving and forgiving God. We too go whoring after other gods. And we too end up getting exiled to Babylon. Your Babylon is different from my Babylon, but exile is exile. And all of us at one time or another, or maybe even tonight, have found ourselves sitting in a distant land and looking at the choices we've made and wondering why on earth we did this or said that. We're in the season of Epiphany right now. And remember that the word epiphany means to make manifest, to reveal. We spend this entire season seeing Jesus reveal who he is, to reveal how loving and forgiving God is. When we blatantly trample the Ten Commandments and refuse to repent, he will send us away into exile. An exile of our own creation, but exile nonetheless. But hear his promise that God will always take us back. He will remarry us again and again and again. No matter what we've done, we always have a second chance with God. Got to remember, in Isaiah's day, a woman had no ability to make a living. So if she got caught cheating and was sent away by her husband, she was going to spend a life in prostitution and begging. And her only hope for a happy life was to beg her husband for forgiveness and to take her back. This is exactly what happened to Israel. It is also exactly what happens to us again and again. We cheat on God by breaking his commandments, by placing someone or something above him. And he sends us away, and he names us desolate, and we beg forgiveness, and he always forgives us. He always takes us back and renames us Beulah, married. That's why the wedding of Cana is such a big deal. Jesus was the price that had to be paid for the salvation of God's people. Jesus was the price. See, in order for God to take us back again and again, in order for God to forgive us, the adultery that we commit with other gods had to be paid off. And Jesus paid that price. He paid the price willingly by dying on the cross and by suffering hell. He suffered so that we could be remarried to God, so that we could be called Beulah. He did his first miracle at the wedding in Cana by providing the best wine that had ever been consumed. And he didn't provide a couple bottles. As near as we can tell, he provided 180 gallons of it. See, that's how God is. When God chooses to pour his blessings out, he floods us with them. When we turn to God and are called married, we are flooded with his grace so that it fills us up and overflows out of us and fills others up with the best wine we've ever had. And we are called Beulah, married to God, married to the very God of the universe, who loves us above everything else.